begins as a peaceful afternoon in the park for little Ava, and her mother quickly spirals into a nightmare when a police officer crosses every line of decency. But no one, not a single soul, could have predicted what would happen next when Dwayne Johnson steps in to take a stand for justice. Stay tuned until the very end to witness the moment that changes everything. And don't forget to like, share, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. The sun cast a golden glow over the bustling park, where laughter and joy filled the air. Children raced across the playground, their excited voices blending with the rhythmic creak of swings and the occasional bark of a playful dog. Among them was 7-year-old Ava, her braided hair bouncing with every giggle as she dashed across the wood-chip-covered ground. She paused at the monkey bars, gripping them tightly before calling out to her mother, her face beaming with pure childhood joy. Laura sat on a nearby bench, watching her daughter with a soft smile. A paperback novel rested in her lap, but her attention was fully on Ava. Her warm brown eyes reflected years of quiet strength, and her relaxed yet attentive posture spoke of how deeply she cherished these peaceful moments. The park, filled with the warmth of human connection and the carefree laughter of children, felt like a rare escape from the daily grind. Around her, other parents chatted in small groups, stealing occasional glances at their kids, ensuring they were safe. Atop the slide, Ava waved enthusiastically, her laughter ringing through the air like a melody. Laura waved back, her heart swelling with love. These moments, so simple, so precious, were fleeting, and she knew it. But the serenity of the afternoon was about to be shattered. A figure appeared at the edge of the park, his presence disrupting the peaceful atmosphere like a dark cloud swallowing the sun. A tall, white police officer, dressed in a crisp uniform, stood rigidly, his expression starkly out of place in the lively setting. His gaze swept over the playground, pausing on each child as though scanning for a crime scene. Then, his eyes locked onto Ava. Something in his face shifted, his expression hardened. Laura's smile faded. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach as she sat up straighter, her book slipping to the ground, forgotten. The officer moved with purpose, his heavy footsteps unnaturally loud against the pavement. His imposing frame cast a long shadow over the playground. Ava, still unaware of his approach, perched at the top of the slide, waving once more at her mother, her innocent joy unbroken. Laura's heart pounded. "Ava, sweetheart, come down," she called, trying to keep her voice calm, though an edge of urgency slipped through. Before Ava could react, the officer reached the slide's base. His voice cut through the air, cold and sharp. "What are you doing here? You don't belong in this park." Ava's laughter died instantly. Confusion flickered across her small face. "I'm just playing," she said softly, her voice unsteady. Laura was on her feet in seconds, her protective instincts kicking in. "Excuse me," she said firmly, closing the distance. "That's my daughter. Is there a problem?" The officer didn't look at her. His focus remained on Ava, his expression unyielding. "Ma'am, step back. This is official business." Laura's fists clenched at her sides. "She's a child. Whatever this is, it's unnecessary. Let her be." Ignoring her, the officer's hand shot out, gripping Ava's small arm. The girl gasped, confusion turning to fear. "You're not supposed to be here," he repeated, his tone colder. Ava squirmed, her eyes wide with panic. "Let me go," she cried, her voice breaking. Laura's heart cracked. She surged forward, her voice rising. "Let her go. You have no right to touch her." The officer turned, his gaze icy. "I told you to step back, ma'am." Laura refused. She reached for Ava's free arm, but the officer shoved her back. She stumbled but caught herself, fire blazing in her eyes, fear mixed with fury. Around them, the park's once lively chatter fell into silence. Parents froze, their gazes fixed on the unfolding confrontation. Some pulled out their phones, recording. Others hesitated, uncertain whether to step in. The air grew thick with tension. Ava sobbed, her small body trembling. "Mommy, help me." Laura's voice cracked with desperation. Please, just let her go. She's just a child. But the officer's grip remained firm. His posture rigid. His authority unshaken. Then, just as he began dragging Ava away, shattering every sense of safety this park had once promised, something happened that no one could have foreseen. A deep voice, powerful and unyielding, cut through the tension like a knife. Let her go. And just like that, everything changed. Stay until the end, because what happens next is something you have to see to believe. Just when you think things couldn't get any worse, a peaceful day at the park takes a horrifying turn. Little Ava and her mother never expected an ordinary afternoon to spiral into a nightmare, but what happened next left everyone stunned. And when Dwayne Johnson steps in, everything changes. Stay until the very end to witness the moment that no one saw coming. Don't forget to like, share, and comment where you're watching from. The officer's arm was yanked back as he turned sharply, irritation flashing across his face. Without hesitation, he grabbed Ava, lifting her off the ground as she screamed in terror. Ignoring her cries, he marched toward a nearby garbage bin. Laura's breath caught in her throat. Her body froze in pure horror as she watched the officer heartlessly shove her daughter into the trash. Ava's muffled sobs echoed painfully from within, the sound slicing through Laura's soul like a knife. The crowd gasped, their shock rippling through the park. Parents shouted in protest, their phones raised higher, capturing every second of the unthinkable scene. Children clung to their parents, some beginning to cry, frightened by the escalating confrontation. Laura lunged toward the bin, her hands trembling as she desperately tried to pull Ava out. But the officer stepped in front of her, his stance unmovable, his face void of any remorse. Step away, ma'am, he said coldly, as if what he had just done was justified. Laura's voice shattered. You're a monster. That's my daughter. By now, the entire park was aware of the gravity of what was happening. Voices rang out from all directions, demanding justice. The crowd pressed forward, their outrage growing. The officer's grip on his radio tightened, ready to call for backup, but before he could, a new voice cut through the chaos. That's enough. The air shifted. All eyes turned as a towering figure strode forward with a calm yet deadly purpose. Broad shoulders, powerful presence, Dwayne Johnson had entered the scene. The crowd instinctively parted, murmurs of disbelief filling the space as people realized who had just stepped in. Dwayne's gaze locked onto the officer, his jaw tight, his expression a controlled storm of fury. Let her go. The officer faltered for a split second, taking in the intimidating force in front of him. But he quickly masked his hesitation, straightening his shoulders. Stay back, he barked. This doesn't concern you. Dwayne took another step forward, his presence alone enough to make the entire park hold its breath. It concerns everyone here, he said, his voice unwavering. When a child is treated like trash, it becomes everyone's problem. Let her go. The tension was suffocating. The crowd, once frozen in shock, began moving closer, their anger intensifying. Parents held their children tighter, their fear turning into rage. Phones stayed locked on the scene, every second documented. Laura stood at the edge of the bin, her hands gripping its rim as she fought to steady herself. Inside, Ava's sobs grew quieter, exhaustion and fear weighing on her small body. The sound was gut-wrenching, piercing through every voice, every noise, cutting straight into Laura's heart. How dare you, Laura spat, her voice raw with rage and grief. She turned to the officer, her hands clenched so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She's just a child. Let her out. The officer, still holding his ground, refused to meet her gaze. His face remained impassive, his eyes cold, as if he had already justified his actions in his own mind. Step back, ma'am, he repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. His hand hovered over the radio on his shoulder. You are interfering with law enforcement. A voice from the back of the crowd erupted. You call this law enforcement? She's a little girl. Another woman shouted, "You're nothing but a bully in a uniform." More voices joined in, their anger surging. The officer's grip on control was slipping, and he knew it. His eyes darted from the furious crowd to Dwayne, whose stance had not wavered. "Stay back," the officer barked, his voice cracking with the first hint of unease. "I will call for backup if necessary." Laura's knees threatened to give out, but she refused to back down. Her daughter was still in that bin, humiliated, terrified, and alone. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to act, to protect Ava at all costs. She reached for the bin again. The officer stepped forward, blocking her path. "You need to calm down, ma'am," he said, his voice laced with condescension. "This is not the way to handle things." Laura's rage boiled over. "Not the way to handle things," she shot back, her voice shaking with fury. "You threw my daughter into a garbage bin. How is that protecting anyone? How is that enforcing the law?" The officer's jaw tightened. His mask of control was beginning to crack. And the crowd? They weren't just murmuring anymore. They were shouting. "This is unacceptable," a man yelled. "We're not going to stand for this," another voice rang out. "Let the girl go." The energy in the park was shifting. The people who had once hesitated were now stepping forward, their voices uniting in a single demand. Justice. Laura felt a shift, hope flickering inside her despite the tears streaming down her face. She took a step forward, her courage fueled by the support around her. Then, suddenly, the officer moved. His hand shot to his holster. For a breathless second, the world seemed to stop. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a pair of handcuffs, snapping them open with a sharp, deliberate motion. "If any of you interfere," he shouted, his voice slicing through the chaos, "you'll be arrested for obstructing justice." The crowd wavered for a split second. Some hesitated, stepping back. But Laura? She didn't move an inch. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady. And then, Dwayne took another step forward. And what happened next? It changed everything. Stay tuned, because this is far from over. Tears streamed down Laura's face, her voice shaking with fury. "You've already done enough damage. You're not going to hurt my daughter any more than you already have." The officer glared at her, his face darkening. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a deep voice cut through the tense silence. "That's enough." The crowd fell still. Heads turned toward the source of the interruption as a figure stepped forward, slicing through the sea of people like a force of nature. Dwayne Johnson. His towering frame radiated pure authority, his expression set in a controlled storm of fury. The officer stiffened, his bravado faltering as he took in the sight of him. "This doesn't concern you," he barked, but the confidence in his voice was gone. Dwayne's eyes never wavered. "It concerns everyone here," he said, his voice low, calm, and immovable. He gestured toward the garbage bin. "You threw a child in the trash. That's not law enforcement. That's abuse." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Phones remained fixed on the confrontation, capturing every moment. The air was so thick with tension that it felt like time had slowed. The officer squared his shoulders, desperate to reclaim control. "Sir, I need you to step back," he ordered, but the hesitation in his voice betrayed him. "This is an official matter." Dwayne didn't budge. His gaze was steady, unshaken. "An official matter?" His voice was quiet, but it carried more weight than any shouted command. "That's a child you just humiliated and terrorized. You think that's what your badge is for?" The officer's face reddened, anger bubbling to the surface. "I was doing my job." Dwayne's voice cut him off. "She was playing on a slide. Being a kid. What exactly did she do to deserve this?" The crowd erupted, their anger no longer contained. "You call this justice?" a man shouted. "She's a little girl," a woman cried out. The officer's grip on his handcuffs tightened. His authority was slipping. Fast. Dwayne stepped closer, towering over him. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, his voice calm but unwavering. "You're going to let that little girl out of the trash bin, and you're going to apologize. Right now." The officer hesitated. His pride battled against the reality of the situation. For a moment, it looked like he might comply. Then, his jaw tightened. "I don't take orders from you." Dwayne's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened. "Then maybe you need a taste of your own medicine." Before the officer could react, Dwayne moved. With the precision of a seasoned fighter, his hands shot out, gripping the officer's arms. The crowd gasped as Dwayne lifted him clean off the ground. A stunned silence filled the park. The officer flailed, his legs kicking uselessly as he struggled to break free. But Dwayne didn't hesitate. With one smooth motion, he turned toward the garbage bin and dropped him in. The crowd erupted. Cheers. Applause. A wave of victorious energy swept through the park. Parents clapped, children laughed, and phones caught every second of the spectacle. The officer's protests were muffled from inside the bin as he scrambled to climb out, his dignity left in pieces. His once crisp uniform was now smeared with coffee grounds, crumpled wrappers, and the filth of discarded trash. Dwayne turned to Laura, his expression softening. "Let's get your daughter out of there." Laura, hands still shaking, nodded. She reached into the bin and pulled Ava into her arms. The little girl buried her face in her mother's shoulder, her sobs quieting as Laura whispered, "You're safe now. It's over." But as Dwayne looked at the crowd, then back at the humiliated officer struggling to escape the trash, he knew one thing. It wasn't over. Not yet. The energy in the park was electric. Voices surged in unison. "That's what he deserves," someone yelled. "You don't get to treat people like garbage and walk away," another voice called. The officer finally managed to pull himself free, stumbling onto the ground. His face was twisted with rage, his pride shattered in front of hundreds of witnesses. He turned to Dwayne, spitting venom with every word. "You think you're a hero?" His voice shook with fury. "You just assaulted a law enforcement officer. That's a felony." Dwayne took a step forward. And what happened next would change everything. Dwayne Johnson's towering frame cast a long shadow over the disgraced officer, his expression calm yet unyielding, his presence commanding. "You assaulted a child," Dwayne said, his voice low and steady. "You humiliated her, terrorized her, threw her into a trash bin like she was nothing. That's not law enforcement. That's cruelty." The officer's hand trembled with fury as he reached for his radio. "I'm calling this in," he snapped, his voice cracking. "You're going to regret this." The crowd erupted. "Call it in," someone shouted. "Yeah, let them see what you did," another voice added. "We've got it all on video." Dwayne's gaze never wavered. "Go ahead," he said, his tone unshaken. "Call for backup. Let's see how your department reacts when they see this." He gestured toward the dozens of phones aimed directly at them, recording every word, every second of this moment. The officer hesitated. His fingers hovered over the radio. His eyes flickered between the crowd, the sea of phones documenting his every move, and the man standing before him. For the first time, doubt crept into his expression. Laura stepped forward, her grip on Ava tightening. Though her voice trembled, her words were firm. "You've done enough damage," she said. "Leave us alone." The officer turned sharply to her, his expression hardening. "You don't get to tell me what to do," he spat, but the conviction was gone from his voice. He could feel the weight of the crowd pressing down on him, their judgment suffocating. Dwayne took another step forward, his towering presence filling the space between the officer and the family he had terrorized. "You've already crossed too many lines," he said, his voice like steel. "You need to back off. Now." The officer opened his mouth, ready to retaliate, but before he could speak. Sirens. A sharp, distant wail cut through the heavy silence. The crowd turned. The officer's face paled. "Backup's here," someone murmured. "Let's see how this plays out," another voice whispered. Two police cruisers pulled up to the edge of the park, their lights flashing in the late afternoon sun. The sirens died, leaving an eerie quiet in their place. The doors opened, and 4 officers stepped out. Their expressions were a mix of confusion and caution as they scanned the scene. The crowd, the trash bin, and Dwayne Johnson standing at its center. The lead officer, a sharp-eyed woman with a steady, unreadable expression, approached carefully. Her badge glinted in the sunlight as she stopped just feet away from Dwayne. "Sir," she said, her voice measured. "Can you explain what's going on here?" Dwayne nodded, his voice steady. "That officer," he said, pointing to the man still brushing garbage from his uniform, "assaulted a child. He grabbed her without cause, terrorized her, shoved her into a trash bin. When her mother tried to help, he pushed her away." The female officer's jaw tightened. She turned to Laura. "Ma'am, is this true?" Laura hesitated, her voice shaky as she spoke. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, stronger, "He grabbed my daughter. She was just playing. He told her she didn't belong here, and then he threw her away. Like she was nothing." Her voice broke, but she forced herself to continue. She was terrified. A flicker of something, disgust, maybe, flashed in the female officer's eyes. But her expression remained neutral. "Thank you," she said. "Please stay here while we sort this out." She turned toward the disgraced officer. The name on his badge read Price. "Officer Price," she said sharply. "Step aside for a moment." Price bristled. His face turned a deep red, his anger barely contained. "I was doing my job," he snapped, jabbing a finger toward Dwayne. "He assaulted me. He should be in cuffs right now." The female officer raised a hand, silencing him. "We'll handle this," she said, her voice firm. "Step aside." Price hesitated. His jaw tightened, but under the weight of her glare, he stepped back, his fists clenched at his sides. The officer turned back to Dwayne. "Is there anything else you'd like to add?" Dwayne glanced at Ava, still clinging to her mother, her small body trembling. His expression darkened. "This isn't just about today," he said. "It's about the fact that he thought he could get away with it. He's not fit to wear that badge." The crowd murmured in agreement. The rage they had felt moments ago had settled into something else, something sharper, something more determined. The female officer inhaled deeply, her eyes scanning the scene, clearly weighing her options. "Thank you," she said finally. "We'll take it from here." She signaled to her colleagues, who began gathering witness statements, reviewing the videos captured by the crowd. Price stood off to the side, his expression dark, his authority shattered. Dwayne turned back to Laura, his voice softer now. "Are you both okay?" Laura nodded, though her hands were still shaking. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." Dwayne gave her a reassuring nod. "You're not alone," he said. "We're going to make sure this doesn't happen again." The weight in the air began to shift. The officers had taken control of the situation. The crowd started to disperse, though many lingered, still recording, still whispering. But as Dwayne watched Price standing there, seething, humiliated, his career on the line, he knew this wasn't over. Not yet. And what happens next? You'll want to see it.as. The sun dipped lower, long shadows stretched across the park, but the weight of the moment still hung heavy. Though the initial chaos had settled, tension remained thick in the air. The crowd, smaller now, refused to disperse, their phones still recording, their whispers filled with outrage. Dwayne stood firm, a steady force beside Laura and Ava. The little girl, still shaken, clung to her mother, her tear-streaked face buried in Laura's chest. Each time Laura stroked her hair, it was as much for her own comfort as Ava's. Officer Price, now somewhat cleaned up but visibly humiliated, stood off to the side. His face burned red with anger, his jaw tightening each time he glanced at Dwayne. His pride was wounded, and he wasn't about to let it go. The female officer in charge approached Price, her expression firm. "We've gathered enough witness statements. You need to come with us for questioning." Price's head snapped toward her. "Are you serious?" he barked, his voice drawing the attention of the crowd. "I was doing my job." "That's what we'll determine," she responded, unfazed. "Your actions were caught on multiple recordings. We need to investigate." Price's anger boiled over. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, jabbing a finger at Dwayne. "He assaulted me. Humiliated me in front of all these people. And now you're treating me like a criminal?" Dwayne remained silent, his presence alone commanding the moment. The crowd murmured, their frustration rising again. "Enough," the officer said sharply. "This isn't about him. It's about what you did. Cooperate, or it will only get worse." Price hesitated, nostrils flaring. But he knew he had lost. With a huff, he stomped toward the police cruiser, his shoulders stiff with indignation. The crowd erupted, some cheered, others jeered. About time, someone yelled. Another voice called out, "You can't treat people like that and expect to get away with it." Laura turned to Dwayne, her voice barely above a whisper. "Will he really face consequences?" Dwayne's gaze softened. "He has to. There's too much evidence. Too many witnesses." Laura nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. "I just don't want Ava to have to relive this. She's already been through so much." Dwayne placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone. We'll make sure Ava gets justice. That officer will answer for what he did." Meanwhile, the world outside the park was already ablaze. Videos of the incident flooded social media, headlines calling out the shocking abuse of power. Police officer throws child into trash bin, caught on video, and Dwayne Johnson stands up against police brutality dominated the news. Public outrage swelled. Support poured in. But so did criticism. Dwayne, back home, scrolled through an avalanche of messages, praise, anger, debate. His agent called, warning of potential backlash. He ignored it. This wasn't about him. His focus remained on Ava and Laura. Laura, exhausted, turned off her phone. She barely had the energy to process the flood of messages. All that mattered was Ava, asleep beside her, small hands clutching her mother's blouse even in slumber. Then her phone rang again. Dwayne's name flashed on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Laura, it's Dwayne. Just checking in. How's Ava?" "She's asleep, but she hasn't spoken since we got home. She's so scared." "That's understandable," Dwayne said gently. "She went through something no child should. But she's strong. Like her mom." Laura's lips trembled into a faint smile. "Thank you. For everything." "You don't have to thank me," Dwayne said firmly. "This isn't over. That officer needs to be held accountable." "I just want Ava to feel safe again," Laura admitted. "That's all that matters." "She will," Dwayne assured her. "But for that to happen, we have to make sure this isn't swept under the rug. People are watching. We can use this to push for real change." Laura hesitated. The thought of staying in the spotlight made her stomach churn. "I don't know if I can do that. I don't want Ava dragged into something bigger than this." "I get it," Dwayne said. "But you're not alone. I'll be with you every step of the way. And so will the people who are standing up for you." Silence hung between them before Laura finally whispered, "I'll think about it. But right now, I just want to focus on Ava." "Of course," Dwayne said. "If you need anything, call me." The next morning, the incident had become a national story. News anchors debated it. Advocacy groups rallied. Hashtag justice for Ava and hashtag stop police abuse trended. People demanded accountability. Meanwhile, Officer Price tried to defend himself. "I was doing my duty," he claimed, but his words only fueled public outrage. The pressure mounted. Days later, the courtroom was packed. Laura sat in the front row, clutching Ava's hand. Dwayne was beside them, steady as ever. Across the room, Price sat rigid, his jaw clenched. The prosecution laid out its case with precision. Videos played, showing Ava's terror, Laura's desperate pleas, and Price's callous actions. Gasps rippled through the audience. When the defense tried to reframe the situation, the prosecutor shut it down. Throwing a 7-year-old into a trash bin isn't public safety. It's abuse of power. Dwayne took the stand. His voice was unwavering. No child should ever be treated like that, especially not by someone sworn to protect them. Laura testified next. Her voice trembled but never broke. "I begged him to stop. I told him she was my daughter. But he wouldn't listen." By the end, the verdict was clear. "Officer Price, this court finds you guilty of misconduct and abuse of authority." The courtroom erupted, cheers, tears, relief. Price was led away in disgrace. Outside, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. Dwayne stepped forward. His voice, steady and strong, carried over the crowd. "This isn't just about one officer," he said. "It's about making sure this never happens again." That evening, as Laura and Ava sat at home, Dwayne's name flashed on her phone again. "I just wanted to check in," he said. Laura smiled. "We're okay." Ava smiling again. "That's what matters," Dwayne replied. Weeks later, they returned to the park. A new mural adorned the wall, children of all races playing together under the words, "This park belongs to everyone." Ava traced the painted letters with her small fingers. "It's beautiful." "It is," Laura whispered, watching her daughter run toward the swings. Dwayne sat beside her. "She's getting her confidence back." Laura nodded, emotion swelling in her chest. "She told me she was ready." "That's real bravery," Dwayne said. Before leaving, he handed Laura a small package. Inside was a bracelet, engraved with 3 simple words. "You are brave." That night, Ava slipped it onto her wrist, beaming as she read the words aloud. "You are, Ava," Laura whispered. "You're the bravest person I know." Their journey wasn't over. The fight for justice had just begun. But for the first time in a long time, Ava laughed again. And that was everything. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, like, share, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. Stay tuned.